I know that we've looked at assistive technology before in education and a lot of fields, but for mass usage, I feel like it's still new. So
thank you for that. Wally, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I'll jump in. I'll say that definitely. First of all, I'm Wally, first year master's student, second semester. Anyways, so a couple of things were coming up. I think there's one of my mentors. He would say that Wally, you might have a preference for night or day, but it doesn't matter. It comes as a package. So like night and day, I think that this also is a package, but so is everything. So I think there's some good, not so good. Some of the things that is jumping at me is I'm just noticing that as human beings, we have disposition towards laziness. So if we can have it our way, I think maybe this group is an exception in terms of continuously pushing ourselves in terms of our growth edges. But I think in general, it makes me wonder about how it may be kind of pushing us towards that. I think increasingly in our modern society, we have had technology do a lot of wonderful things for us. And it's also getting too much good in terms of outsourcing, I think, the things that we really do need in order to activate our default thinking mode, for example. So I can go in more detail about those things, but that's some of the things that are jumping at me. And then the last thing that I will say is for me, noticing that we already have been having some issues when it comes to fake news. It used to be the case that, before, the social media and that sort of thing, that, you would have some guy with a big, whiteboard screaming at people about the end of the world or something crazy like that. And we would all be like, okay, that's a crazy, definitely person. But now, with AI, there is another things that are getting more sophisticated. It's increasingly harder to tell what's, true. And and those things are spreading faster than it used to. And I feel like, we already are seeing that fake news is traveling a lot faster than it can keep up with the increased reality that we are finding ourselves in. We already are divided, and I think there's a lot more exploitations that can take place. So with that, I'll stop there for a minute and toss the mic back.
Yeah, all of those are very good points. And I want to go back to Fatma's point, because I think one of the reasons why we included this question is a lot of us have been watching AI for a long time. So I guess I first heard about AI in 2016, and it was because of Amazon actually hiring, and they were discriminating because they told AI to find them good engineers, and they only hire white men from certain schools. So if you went to like a school that had women's college in the title, you just were not called back for interviews. And then 2023 comes and it's everywhere. Like everyone's like, oh, ChatGPT, I'm going to go in and I'm going to talk to this thing. It's going to write my papers. We need to have plagiarism text. No one's going to know how to read anymore. And I'm like, oh, this feels like, where did it come from? So I felt like there was some new energy coming into this. And then Wally, well, you said you raised up so many good points about especially the things that we should be considering. What do we lose when we go to these technologies, right? We gain a lot, but it's a trade-off. Everything's a trade-off. And we don't get to get the good and not the bad. And I think that those were such good points. Does anyone want to add anything here?
Well, happy to add in. and then I promise I won't take over. So you talked about asking AI to help with HRD field, right? And that's something that has been going on with the tools coming out. I mean, AI, ChatGPT, this is not the first version, right? There was for several years, there was an option that we had out there that could generate only, what was it, a couple of thousand words or characters. So it was in there, but it was making a lot of mistakes. And if you go back to tweets for several years, I mean, one of the things that it was doing is that if you said woman hospital, it would say nurse, right? man hospital, it would say doctor, right? So there's all that discrimination that they've been working on, and it's doing better. Hence all of those scripts that you see if you go on ChatGPT. It was like, we're trying, we're improving, and they're changing things. So it's learning, and it's learning quickly. We've had a huge change come when we had social media, starting with Facebook. I mean, there was a lot before that. It was used, but it was not turning heads. People were not excited about it as much as once Facebook hit. And, everybody had social media profiles. We were worried about people not being able to read at that point as well, right? And people not being able to write. And then there were studies done, and we found out that that generation was actually reading more than anyone else. And they were writing more than anyone else, except that it is in a different context. So looking at the technology and how it's utilized, it's definitely going to create a gap. And it would be interesting to see what kind of gap that is, but how could it be used to bridge that gap also? Because thinking about responsible AI and culturally responsive AI, and so how can we make it work for us so that maybe we can flood all of that social media with the good things that people of color could gain a little bit more presence, so that they're not only hiring white people for engineers at Amazon and etc.
Yeah, such good points. I know some people said that they've been trying it. Does anyone want to talk about how they've been trying it, or what they might? We do have time to talk about some of the implications in professional practice, but I'm just curious, like in our personal lives, like how we've been using it. Brian, go ahead.
Yeah, actually, I'm one of them who said I use it. I'm not proficient, but I definitely use it. But for one of the things I use it for is specifically with kind of editing my work grammatically, making sure everything is correct. And because generative AI or chat GPT is it's a tool. It is AI, it is generative AI, but nonetheless, it is a tool, just like how the internet first was a tool and how the calculator was a tool. And slowly but surely, it's going to get acclimated, I feel. And so this is kind of like how I kind of see it. And it's really helpful to me.
So I'm curious, because I see this often in the news when it comes to like adult learning and AI. A lot of professors have taken either hardline approach where it's like, if I catch you using this, this is plagiarism, or an approach where it's like, welcome to my class, I'm gonna teach you this tool and I hope you'll use it and encourage you to use it. What are you all seeing in terms of where your instructors are falling? And if you teach, or if you teach, like, where do you fall on the spectrum?
Well, I teach a course in K through 12 methods, and it's a graduate course. And the first thing and this is at Hunter College, and the first thing of the semester was everybody was worried that we're going to have a lot of plagiarism. And one of the first assignments was to actually write a one-pager as your TESOL beliefs or ENL beliefs as a teacher, etc. But personally, just to see if students are able to write, because also with COVID, what happened is that registration for courses and specifically for teachers has been low. So they accepted more, people who did not necessarily meet that threshold. And so we had students who could not write last semester, who were really struggling. So that was something that we had to do. And this is for a graduate level class, like for a master's degree in education. But the first thing, so personally, I found it to be a very useful tool. Just like Brian was saying, there are some methods and there are some techniques that students find hard to kind of understand. And we talk a lot about content and language integration and lesson planning. And that's like the one thing everybody struggles with. It takes them a long time to get it. So I actually encourage them, flipped learning model to go in and ask your questions, right? Make sure, so we have our chapter that we read, we have the slides, we have the session in class, and we do activities, we create lesson plan templates, etc. But at the same time, use it as a tutor, right? If you have questions, keep going back and forth. You have to make sure that it is giving you the correct information. I mean, I personally tried this semester where we're tackling Keegan and constructive development, and I'm like, okay, do I really understand it? Like, and I was doing the SOI training with Minds at Work, and I was still not 100% clear. And I did ask a few questions, and at the beginning, it did not know how to answer me. After a couple of months, it was giving me better answers. So again, what you're asking, make sure you have to make sure that it is accurate information, but it also gives a lot of examples and explains in different levels, like explain it to me as if I were a fifth grader. And it, grades the language for you. So I personally encourage my team and my students to use it. I tell them to be smart, to not plagiarize, to not copy paste, but it's a resource. So if they use it well, hopefully it's going to be helpful.
Oh, and if I can, can you hear me? Oh, okay. Well, if I can chime in to Fatma's response, I think like what you're saying about, don't just copy the ChatGPT and just copy paste it, because actually if you really look at the nitty-gritty of it, if they want to know a certain expertise of a certain field, they ChatGPT does not have that information. It has only the information that's on the World Wide Web, and it doesn't have everything, doesn't have all the details, nuances that is needed. And I think there's going to be a lot of safeguards for those type of things, I think, in the near future.
I see some comments in the chat. Oh, a lot of comments, so I need to catch up on those. But I was also going to say, I think there are some cases, and you all can feel free to disagree with me, but I think there are some cases where we might encourage students not to use ChatGPT, whereas there might be some where they should, but in other cases they shouldn't. I think one example for me is I was working on a paper on identity protective cognition, which is a concept of how people think. And I went on and asked it to help me find some relevant articles. I was like, find me some articles written between these years, and it gave me some articles that sounded great. It's like, I was like, this is right on. I took the list, I printed it, and I go to Google Scholar to search them. None of them are real. And that's kind of like the hallucination phenomenon, where it's like, oh, I know what articles look like, and I know what names look like, and I know what you're asking me. So let me put these together and see if that works. And I'm like, when I get the list, I thumbs it up because I'm thinking, this is perfect. It's real. And then you go check and it's like, oh no, none of this stuff exists. So I think that might be one case where it's not really great, because it's checking the web, but not the web as of yesterday, right? Like it has a set data set that it can check from. And if it doesn't find anything, it will fill in those gaps.
Yeah, and to your point, DJ, then that makes me wonder about what is the literacy that's necessary that we need to be working on. And I feel like in adult development is about the filters and expanding that. And then also, it feels like, we have some, how do we even determine what's the truth? So, it comes back to also, and certainly it has limitations, but also coming back to the methodologies that have also kind of helped us safeguard, or at least have more checks and balances around that.
I love the idea of digital, of literacy around AI. I mean, I think once you are at the GPT level, you don't need basic digital literacy, but then also looking at the gap that exists of people who need basic digital literacy before they even get there. And then there has been a lot of talk and work around using the three W's, the World Wide Web, in a way that is actually, you're getting the right information. Like Wally was saying, all the fake news, also being able to discriminate and having the right mindset to maybe not necessarily adopt, but work alongside it and know how to use it as a right tool. But then how is it going to create, like, going back to the gap, is that gap going to be bigger? Is it going to make learning smoother and easier? Because now we can even get more tutorials that are personalized to people's learning styles and needs that could be generated quickly. So that's intriguing.
Yeah, it is. And one more use case I'll share, and because on my day job, I work in corporate America and human resources, and we had a town hall today, and our chief learning officer made a joke. He said, "Yeah, I use ChatGPT to write all of your performance reviews," which it's funny, haha, because performance reviews are one of the most personal things you do, right? Like, it's you giving me feedback, and it's going to impact my compensation and my development over time. But what's interesting is that even though he didn't do it, there is a case for using AI to help make better performance reviews, because the quality of those things, which we know are very important to your development as a professional, vary so greatly. And so people sometimes get 2 sentences of performance reviews. So while we're not having ChatGPT write them, they can flag for us, this doesn't look like a good performance review. It doesn't identify, what their skills are, where their areas of development are. So I think that's one area where we might not use it to write it, but it could be helpful in flagging some of the challenges.
Well, since Dr. Maltvia mentioned it on the chat about wanting to explore the use of AI with for a dissertation, I've been thinking about how can AI be used to support adult development, so a growth mindset. And if we were to help at a maybe not faster, but at scale, supporting our teams. So when you have, I'm looking at where I work, I have a team of 160 people that I would love to provide support to, but I cannot do it one-on-one. So how can you personalize that, and how can AI support you in being able to, I'm not going to write 160 performance reviews, but if I put in the right data, would it be able to help me generate, what are some of the needs? So one thing I was looking at, working with or talking to ChatGPT, because for some time it became, I had a flight of a good 7 hours that I was talking to ChatGPT.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, so these are the problems I have in my organization. If I were to use Keegan, if I were to use this questionnaire, Myers-Briggs, all of these, like, what would it be? And how about this problem, this person with this problem? Like, how has it been addressed before? And I mean, there's a lot. So you really need to be able to discriminate and see what is the right way to use it. But I have been looking at technology and how it could be used for learning for a while. And yeah, so if there's anybody working on this and want to go, a few steps further, I would love to collaborate.
Well, I hear there are some people working on it for dissertations. I have not even started thinking about what my dissertation topic will be, but maybe it will be related, so I'll keep that in mind. And I know it's about 7:30, so I do want to pass to Brian because he wanted to share some information about some of the wider views on generative AI. So let me share my screen again.
Okay, hi everyone. So as we were just talking, we had a discussion about like what we think AI is, and I just wanted to share this slide about people, or like famous people or co-founders of Google, Larry Page and Ray Kurzweil, who's a inventor, futurist, and computer scientist, and Professor Noam Chomsky. And I just wanted to kind of feel what they think and see how it jives with you. For instance, Professor Noam Chomsky, I emailed him a few weeks ago, and actually he emailed me back about a generative AI, and he said Chat GPT and the rest may replace routine work where accuracy is not a prime concern, just as Google Translator does. And then he said, of course, I suspect that will be outweighed by their harmful effects. So as you can see in our first question in the discussion, we talked about cynics and or I mean not cynics, but critics, and what they may say to these type of invasive kind of AI, generative AI kind of things. And so I was just curious on what everyone thinks about, for instance, these quotes.
I I have a strong feel I have a strong belief that I think it's so important to have critics because they help us improve the technologies. And I respect Noam Chomsky a lot. I think he raises valid concerns and they definitely should be considered. But I
Mm,
hold that knowledge at the same time, knowing that we've gone past the point of return. And so, you raise up the caution sign and we need to address the caution sign. We can't just run right by you, but there is no way we can really turn around.
yeah, I think so too. In regards with uh I guess the genie's out of the bottle, or what's it called, the Pandora's box has been opened. So how do we come to grips with what we just opened? And like, for instance, Ray Kurzweil, he says that, oh, hold on, yeah, he says that artificial intelligence will reach human levels by around 2029. Follow that out further to say 2045, we will have multiplied the intelligence, the human biological machine intelligence of our civilization, a billion-fold. So what kind of future is that? Or that totally boggles my mind. I think maybe Wally, what you're talking about in regards with AI, about ChatGPT or about generative AI. I think those were kind of similar to what Professor Noam Chomsky was talking about in regards with how technology or how AI could be used as a barrier for others.
Yeah, no, I'm not that fast of a processor. My mind's going a million miles an hour as I've been catching up with this. But certainly, I think one of the things that's also relating to me is that I think we can get very excited about what's new and what's catchy. And it makes me wonder about what are some of the fundamental things that we know about humans and what we know about adults. So if this is what the technology is offering, for me, I'm not interested in competing with that. But what are the fundamental things that makes us human? I mean, I'm seeing lately more research in popular context about the importance of relationships, and friendships in particular. And so it makes me wonder about how to not avoid some of the basic principles that makes us human beings. What contributes to health and well-being. So and I don't necessarily think that it's AI, but I do also think that it can obscure some of the basic stuff that are maybe not so sexy. But it makes me wonder how maybe more folks can get lost, so this feels like too much zooming in. I wonder about what you see from zooming out.
Zooming out, meaning like I used to teach at a high school level, and for instance, a lot of the kids there, a lot of the students, some of them do not have access to computers and things like that. So maybe, you know, Chat GPT or all this AI things in regards with higher tech, in a sense, is going to be a sort of barrier, or but zooming in, zooming out. That's a big question. Anyone else have anything? Is there anything in the chat?
Yeah, the coaching thing really makes me curious
Oh,
because one of the fundamental things that makes us humans is that connection. And I am biased to think that AI cannot replicate human connection. So I'm very curious about some of the connection there. Certainly coaching is not just limited to connection, but it's one of the fundamental things. And then it's support of various kinds.
yeah, I think maybe generative AI could be potentially getting very, very smart. So that could be it's very hard to say how it's going to change coaching or, you know, interpersonal relationships.
Well, I think what this is Terry Maltbia here. I think one thing to consider is that
Hmm.
while ChatGPT may be relatively new, AI is not new. And it's actually omnipresent in many aspects of our life that we aren't necessarily even aware of. So I think one thing, at least I think that can be helpful, is just to take stock, like notice how much AI is actually integrated in our life today. And I don't really think it's a either or proposition. It's not that AI in general or chat GBT in particular is good or bad. Um, I think building in your point, Wally, you know, in the coaching space, there are clearly human connection is really important, and it's
Hmm.
core of what I think coaching is about. And yet there are many aspects of coaching that are actually quite routine. Uh, right. And that AI can be really helpful with. You know, there are as Amber mentioned, she's doing her dissertation on it. We actually have an alumni who's based in India from the coaching program that's recently created an AI tool that's supporting coaching. There's a consulting firm that I sit on the advisory board on that just launched a chat bot to support their coaching work. So this whole idea of the train is already out of the station. It is. So I think we clearly should be aware of um, its its potential challenges, and yet I think it's interesting when I first heard about ChatGPT in January and listened to my colleagues. I would say early on, many of my colleagues were very, oh, what are we going to do about essays and grades and so on? And very shortly thereafter, I went to a conference with people in industry who were thinking very differently about it. And so there's really multiple realities, and I think, you know, like anything else, mindset really matters.
Mhm.
But I think the bigger point I would make is that Chat GBT is just an application, one of many applications of AI. And it's interesting, since it's so popular, I even hear people using the two terms almost as if they're interchangeably.
Mhm.
Like Chat GPT and AI, like they're the same thing. So
No,
this,
that's right. Like even Amazon, when you go to Amazon, there's some AI happening there to promote the products that they think you're most likely to buy, and people don't even think about that part of it.
and it's working.
Mhm.
I can't tell you how much extra money I spent on Amazon just because. And the longer you use Amazon, the more accurate it becomes
Mhm.
at predicting what you're interested in. So that whole notion for Fatma, I think you mentioned that it's kind of sloppy at first. or it can be, depending on the prompts that you put in, but it learns like anything else. And I think we have to understand as adult educators or facilitators of adult learning is what's behind ChatGPT. And so one thing I discovered, which I didn't know until recently, is, and this probably will change very quickly, but at least I forget the name of the firm who produced ChatGPT, but they, right now their database goes to 2001. So if you don't know even that little piece of information, but once I discovered, thank you, Open AI. Once I discovered that, I said, oh, that explains something that it didn't pick up. So anyway, just some thoughts about just taking stock of how much we are already using and impacted by AI, even before we knew that there was this thing called ChatGPT.
Very good point.
Yeah, and I would also say, this is Donna, that there was a point that I used to not laugh, but argue with people who would say, well, Netflix is doing it all with artificial intelligence because it was predictive analytics, which is a very different thing than AI. It's basically analytics looking at how many people who watched that movie liked your movie. But now it's so much more to it. So over time, but what is shocking to me and what's really impacting me personally is the velocity of change most recently. And if it's moving this fast, it's only going to get faster. So, and there's a lot of danger involved in that. Obviously, there's opportunities, just like anything else. There's opportunities, and there's things to be mindful of, and we can be a part of. If you look at XRSI, which is a data, they originally came about because of VR and data safety, but now they're talking more about AI because it's all one thing now. I mean, I think I sent DJ a paper on how even that most simple VR game where you swipe the, what's it called, lightsaber
Beat
chest,
Saber, I love it.
right?
You got me on it. When I read that paper, I bought it. I was like, I want people to have my data now.
It's a phenomenal. It's like the #1 game ever because it's so easy, but you get some exercise and you can figure it out really quickly, and there's good music. But they figured out 50,000 people, Berkeley, they did a study, and they could tell by how someone swiped a square who it was. I mean, that's another kind of. So I'm not. This is these guys' presentation, but there's a lot going on. So.
Yeah, I was thinking about the coaching thing, and I recently tried this one tool where you talk to an avatar, like it's like an AI generated avatar, and you basically simulate a conversation, but you can learn some coaching principles. You can help it challenge its assumptions, learn about its backstory, figure out what some mind loops are. And I think that's really valuable for people who don't necessarily have coaching clients they can practice with. That might be a tool that, could be useful for people who are learning about like loops or, working with people with new clients. So no, Brian has one more slide. Brian, do you want me to pull up your slide?
Yes, please.
All right. And I'll find the article for the Beat Saber one so that I can
Yes.
post it in the chat.
Yeah. So now the next question is in regards to generative AI and its possible usage in the workplace. How can it be utilized? What are the implications of generative AI in your field of practice? Or how might you need to adapt in order to meet the challenges posed by generative AI? Or how can you best utilize generative AI in your field? Like Dr. Malpia was talking about mindset before, about having some people might think it might take our jobs, but then you go to a different industry, then they're totally thinking about something else, like how to actually use it.
before we get to how to use it, just going back to OpenAI and the vision that Elon Musk had when he funded it, and the work that has been done, and the investment from Microsoft and all of that. Now they're talking about changing it to closed AI because they want it to become a for-profit, right? Going from nonprofit to for-profit. It's not OpenAI anymore. Eventually, at some point, because what they're doing now is that they're collecting all of our data. They're collecting all of our questions. I have actually asked ChatGPT to write an email for me, and it gave me the whole email. And I said, well, what should I put on the subject for this email? And it actually gave me that. And then a couple of weeks later, I asked it to write another email, and it gave me the subject. So it started with subject, email subject, and it went. So all of these questions that we've been asking it, it has been using it because that's what you agree to. Everything you give them, it is in their database. Don't share anything private. It's going to be published. Now, we're starting to think about ways to use this technology, and some people are going to adopt it, and then it's going to become closed and cost us a lot of money. So then all of the energy that we're going to be putting towards it, how is it going to work later on? And will people want to embrace it, want to invest in it as organizations, and going back again, maybe creating that gap? When you're talking about the Saber game, the virtual reality has been also like hot in education. Right? How can you, or in training or workforce development and upscaling and reskilling. And so would they go together in this area, right? So you are talking to your fake coachee and asking them questions to kind of get better at being a coach, or would you be, they're performing surgeries now, right? Like doing all of, the touch, all the senses, etc. So how much is going to go into the coaching, for example, or adult learning to work on mindsets so that it can help the way I look at it, so that it can help the general population, Mr. Everybody kind of adopt these technologies in the future, hopefully. So like all of the raising awareness, helping people embrace a learning culture so that once they're done with school, they actually kind of stay connected to learning, hopefully. And because there is technology like this, it makes it a little bit easier for them. So that's something that excites me.
To Professor Malpia's point, and to some of the things that you're raising, Fatma, I actually don't think, although we do have a current one that says it's free, I'm actually always suspicious. Any product that says that it's free, then I know that I am the product. So then it makes me wonder about some of the things that Fatma is raising. What are they collecting about me? And how are they going to be using whatever they're collecting about me to monetize it in ways that I can't see visibly? And we have evidence that every social media is doing just that. Even though they say that they're free, they're very much vested in you staying there as long as possible. And there are other ways that they're profiting from just your mere participation of using the product.
Very good point. Dr. Malpia, oh, sorry, I just saw Dr. Murdoch come off.
No, I'm just interested also in, there's a lot of different, it's not just ChatGPT, that belongs to OpenAI. Now we have a Facebook version, Llama, we have there's the one by Hugging Face, and I'm forgetting the name, but it's starts with a T. But in any case, there are many different types, or like the Bing one, supposedly. I don't have access, DJ. You told me you do have access. I'm still on the wait list. The Bing one gives you opinions and tells you advice, which is totally random. It is hardly coaching. It's just like it comes up with this stuff. So what I'm trying to figure out is if at some point with someone spoke about Kurzweil, who has been talking about the singularity for as long as I've been around, which is a long time. And I posted an article by Ethan Mollick, who I really follow. He's a Wharton professor, and he's really he's an entrepreneurship professor, but he's really into this. So I highly recommend, if you're at all interested, following his blog. But is this all going to merge into one? Like, do we have all these different, databases, and how does that work? They all have different opinions. Do we go from Bing to chat, wherever it is, it's going to be embedded now in Microsoft products, to all over the place and get different answers? Or are they all going to somehow, they're all AWS? Well, no, Microsoft, I'm sorry, wouldn't be Microsoft. It would be in theirs, Azure. It would be in their cloud. So I don't know. It's very, and who knows what's going to happen, but it's an interesting time. It's an interesting time to be a part of it.
I think the exciting, Melanie, go ahead, sorry.
No, please go ahead.
Thank you. So I'm sorry I came in a few minutes late, and I really appreciate you guys putting this on today. And a shout out to Terry Malvia. I just mentioned you in class the other day about mindsets and having a judge or a learning mindset. And so that has a long life.
Are you still at West Point?
I still am, yes.
Very
Yep.
good. Very cool.
And I was thinking as this came about, it surprised me how fast this has come up, I guess, because I agree with you. It's been around, but we really haven't thought of it, right, in this way with ChatGPT. We've been using different words like algorithms, for Google or this or that. And when the words change, I think people don't always know that we're talking about the same thing. But I was first asked at the Army Navy game what I thought, and I thought I had time. But lo and behold, I was behind the power curve, and this just exploded. And I think, just for me, I've had a series of different thoughts happening so quickly. At first, of course, as an educator, I was worried about, what does this mean to students? And I work at the prep school at West Point. So these are kids that did not qualify to get into West Point, but have qualities that we think would make good leaders for the Army. And so we are trying to brush up their math and English so they can qualify. So working with students that have a challenge writing in the first place, it made me very nervous. And what surprised me is how fast and furious the voices were about how education had to embrace this. And it made me a little suspect. And I listened to Noam Chomsky do an interview with someone. I watched his video, and he didn't, and I was like, finally, somebody who has, a little criticism, I think, about this. And then I thought, well, my daughter, who's a little autistic, who's 21, and when she hit adulthood, she's very smart, but when she hit adulthood, just the social anxiety and the communication just grinded to a standstill. And I thought, oh, maybe she could use this, and she said, absolutely not. I'm suspect of it. And I was like, yay, you keep writing to think. But then she surprised me and did her own prompt, which was extraordinarily complex and was very excited. She wanted to put all this sci-fi information in and see, if she could get a better, more accurate sci-fi story novel, but it has limits. She couldn't go very far. And I think it's great to hear about the limits because I haven't done enough research, which is why I'm here. So thank you for the 2001 database. But I think I'm trying to warm up to this because I don't want to be a Luddite, but I also, and I see with Excel, I was trying to talk to my math director about this. And I think, I'm always using these built-in formulas, I mean, I do know how to do standard deviation, but it's kind of laborious. It's not that difficult. But if I can just write, type in the beginning of the formula and it auto generates the answer, it's
Yeah.
fast. It's fast. And it's
Sure,
not
it's gonna do
inaccurate,
that
as
soon.
Noam would say.
I just
So-
I have to chime in, Melanie, on one thing when you talked about your daughter saying, no, no, no. I also have a daughter, and in fact, she works for Meta and she's been there almost 5 years. And as soon as I bring up any of this, I don't want to hear about it. I don't want to hear about it. I don't want to know. And she's in her 20s. She just shuts down, and she's a very good writer, actually. And I don't know why. She wants nothing to do with it. She's not gonna have a choice soon, but it is.
Well, my son works for Meta too, in the VR space. So this is very interesting.
Interesting.
Yeah, so I think this is interesting. I just feel like it's just been so fast that I myself have been, I understand, Terry, what you're saying. It's not good or bad, but it's so fast that I'm trying to wrap my head around about, you're constantly telling the students at West Point, you don't want to cheat, you don't want to plagiarize, you don't want to use Wikipedia, you don't want to just use Google Scholar, and they still make lazy mistakes, and they're just going to do that with this too. But hopefully, like my daughter, she didn't want to do it, so hopefully there's some that will, like your daughter, stay away. But that's just what I'm thinking. And there was one more thought, but I forgot what it is. But thanks for letting me chime in.
Thank you so much for chiming in. I know we are approaching time and we have one last check-in that I want to do, but also feel free to share any thoughts that are coming up for you. So we'll go back to the AHA and do this last, I think it's a word cloud. Let me start it up. Oh, it's a reflection prompt. So feel free to just, type what you're thinking.
Hey, DJ.
Yep.
As people are reflecting, I think of AI in general and ChatGPT and so on, similar to when I was in college and learning statistics when SPSS first came out.
Mm-hmm.
The shift went from spending sometimes hours on calculations to learning how to interpret the results.
Mm-hmm.
Terry, I like what you said, but I often think of writing, at least in my experience, especially at Teachers College where I had to write a lot. It was a way of developing my thinking to a higher level. And that's what I'm just worried about losing.
Yeah, no, no, and I agree. I like the idea So I've actually used ChatGPT for editing. So I've done the writing and then put in and asked it to edit it. And you are still the arbiter. And so I think that I'm the one that wrote the comment about possibility thinking and critical thinking.
Mhm.
You know, because I think those two elements are really important. The possibility thinking allows me to look at what can be, and the critical thinking allows me to not take it without thinking, uh, so that there's that dual processing going on.
Mhm.
And if I can just add on to what Melanie and Dr. Malpia was talking about, I think it's in a sense, this program teaches us about the VUCA world of volatile uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguousness. So in a sense, I guess ChatGPT or generative AI is the next VUCA moment. So, you know, it's up to us to figure out how to think positively and critically on how to utilize it for the best, for the future that is. The best is yet to come.
Yep. And I'll just add over our history, how we define literacy has evolved. There was a time where if you were going to be a doctoral student, you need to learn Latin. And I don't think any of us can speak Latin now. So I think we'll just continue to be updating our mindsets. And it's helpful for us to be in that learner mindset to know that as the world changes, we should be critical. We should be cautious. That's one of the things we learn at Teachers College as well. But we should also be open and learning and figuring out ways to be active participants and not just passive along for the ride. So thank you all for joining us today. I know we're 2 minutes over, but I have enjoyed this conversation. I loved hearing your perspective so much. I'm going to take all this data and maybe write like a short blog post. And then this was recorded. So we will try to send out the recording to the Adult Learning and Leadership Department. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you for organizing. Have a good night.
Thank you, DJ.
Thank you.